Hi, Cameron Coral, sci-fi author here, and I have a question sent to me from a reader. She asked, what is your favorite childhood book? And this brought up a lot of memories because when I remember I learned to read a little bit later than other kids. I guess I was a late bloomer when it came to reading. I remember the first day of first grade, a teacher putting a piece of paper in front of me and saying, which of these words can you read? And I just stared at it in kind of frozen terror, and I was a shy kid because I couldn't read any of the words. Like, I might have been able to read cat, and I remember her pointing at the simplest words, and I just kind of stared at her and shook my head. So she put me into the slowest reading group, and when I finally, after a few days, when I paid attention and listened to the teacher, and when I started to read, when I learned to read, it's like something snapped inside of me, and I could read fast all of a sudden, and it's like a world unlocked to me, and I wanted to read everything I could get my hands on. I was, jumping up and shouting the answers when we'd be reading in a group together, and I devoured books, and I wanted to get my hands on everything. And I just remember that feeling of being, like a world opened up to me. So I read a lot, and I started to, because I was reading so fast, I started to want to read more than just like little kids' books. And I remember my stepdad, he gave me a book about it was from a new writer he had heard about, and this writer was from the state of Maine, where my stepdad was from, and it happened to be Stephen King. So my stepdad gave me Salem's Lot when I was like, 7 years old or 8 years old. And I remember just loving that book, and I would carry it around everywhere I went, and it was about vampires, and I happened to be obsessed with vampires because the few TV stations we had were, they would sometimes play these scary movies, and a bunch of them were old vampire movies from the 70s, and I just loved it. I mean, I wanted to be bitten by a vampire, and so I could become a vampire. That's how much I loved it. So to have Salem's Lot, it definitely made a big impression on me. I can't say that I knew everything that was happening in that book or understood it, but I mean, I remember just wanting to get to all the scary parts and learn about the vampires. And so that was my first, I guess, the book that made the biggest impression on me. And if I had to pick a favorite book for kids, it would definitely be James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. And I just loved that book. I had a nice hardcover picture, illustrated version of it, and I just loved it. I loved that he got away from his the two ladies, the mean aunts, after his parents died, and he got to go into the peach and meet these incredible insect creatures, and I just was fascinated by it. And it's funny because I remember there was a big class project. I was maybe in second or third grade, and we had to write our own book and actually illustrate it and come up with the text, come up with a story, and then we put it together onto pages and made an actual book, a bound book. And I wanted mine to be perfect. And so I happened to be reading James and the Giant Peach at the time, so I basically condensed that story into something I could fit into the size of this little small book. I summarized it, I guess, and I took some of the cool illustrations, and I remember actually taking tracing paper and tracing out the different, scenes from the book, from that illustrated book. And I guess I plagiarized that book for my project. And the funny thing is, I was just a kid. I didn't know what plagiarism was, and I didn't know it was against the rules, or maybe, the teacher hadn't really explained it properly. So I just kind of laugh, and I felt a little silly. when somebody pointed out that, oh yeah, you traced the book because mine looked so good and everybody else's were, you know, they drew by freehand and they weren't very good illustrations on those other books, and so mine was pretty great. So yeah, so those definitely James and the Giant Peach was my favorite book for kids, and my first adult book as a kid was Salem's Lot by Stephen King.